World War I, and how we entered it. The first main reason was militarism. Militarism was the development of armed forces and their use as a tool of diplomacy. The second reason was the alliance system. There were two major defense alliances in Europe, the Triple Entente, aka the Allies, which consisted of France, Britain, and Russia, and on the other side, the Triple Alliance, which consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The next reason for us entering the war was nationalism, or a devotion to the interests and culture of one's nation. Nationalism often led to competitive rivalries among nations, and in this atmosphere of competition, many feared Germany, whose power was growing in Europe. The next reason was imperialism. As Germany industrialized, it competed with France and Britain in the contest to gain colonies. And finally, the last reason was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Because of this, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, but because of the alliance system, it pulled one nation after another into the conflict. And if we put all the causes of why we entered the war together, we get militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination. And if you take the first letter of all of those, you get mania. This was a pretty huge war, but the US still wasn't convinced for why they should join. The main thing that citizens of the United States were thinking at the time was, why join the war? Most Americans saw no reason to join a struggle which was 3,000 miles away. The war didn't even threaten American lives or property. However, this doesn't mean that Americans were indifferent to who would win the war, because public opinion was really strong, except it was divided. Meanwhile, the Allies were fighting the Germans, and in World War I, it was a time for new warfare and war mechanics. One of the new things that was created during this war was the trench system, or trench warfare. Between the two trenches, enemy and whoever side you were on, I guess, well, in between them was no man's land, which was pretty much a barren part in between the two trenches filled with barbed wire, and it was called no man's land because most of the time the soldiers who charged in there were just mowed down by enemy machine gun fire. The war between the Allies and Germany right now was almost like a stalemate. Because of the trenches, neither one could advance. It was like a really good MMA cage fight that neither side wouldn't give up. Of course, ever since the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, the Americans have been on their toes of whether they should join the war or whether they should just stick to their isolationist policies. Pacifists such as William Jennings Bryan thought that war was evil. On the other hand, many Americans felt pretty close to Britain because they had similar ancestry and language and similar democratic institutions and legal systems, many similarities between Britain and the US. Basically, we were bros. And once again, while we were still contemplating whether we should join the war or not, the war finally hits home. Basically, what happened was Germany created a blockade on Britain. Britain was really proud of its naval strength, and they should be because it was really strong. Basically, what they wanted to do was they blockaded Germany to prevent weapons and other supplies from getting through. And of course, Germany wouldn't be happy about this, and they wouldn't just let this slide by, so they responded to the British blockade with a counter-blockade called U-boats, or Untersee boot, the German word for a submarine. And basically, any British or Allied ship found in the waters around Britain would be sunk, and it wouldn't always be possible to warn crews and passengers of an attack. Because of this, a U-boat sank the British liner Lusitania off the southern coast of Ireland. Now, this wouldn't have been such a big deal, but of the 1,198 casualties, 128 were Americans. This was when American public opinion turned against Germany and the Central Powers. But of course, the U.S. still couldn't decide whether they wanted to join the war. That all changed, however, when a telegram, or the Zimmerman note, was intercepted by Britain. Basically, the German foreign minister proposed to the German ambassador in Mexico to make an alliance between Mexico and Germany. And what he promised was that if the war with the United States broke out, Germany would support Mexico in recovering its quote-unquote lost territory. Because of this, the American entry into the war could be claimed as a war of democracies against brutal monarchies. And that was officially how the U.S. entered World War I. Okay, now time for a little quiz to see if you guys have been paying attention. What did mania stand for exactly? Was it militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assistance? Or was it militarism, alliances, NATO, imperialism, and assassination? Or, one last choice, was it militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination? Click on the annotation that you think was correct, and in that video you'll see if you were right or wrong.